Welcome to the Voices of a Stranger podcast. Here is your host, Reza Garajadaki.
Welcome to another episode of The Voice of a Stranger. I'm your host, Reza Garajadaki. I am so excited because we have Dunia Shaba here, a person from Iraq who has survived the Iraqi war, worked with the American forces as a lawyer, actually came into the law school where I work, and she's a current lawyer, and she's looking to get some information about practicing law in the U.S. And she came to my office and we spoke, and I said, you have to come on my podcast, because she told me her story and it's pretty incredible. So, hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Hi, Mr. Reza. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm very excited to share some of my stories that I've always wanted people to hear about. So thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much.
It.
So, I know you have a lot to cover, so I want to stop talking. Just kind of give us the story of your life before the war. I know you have some interesting stories, and just give us the kind of what happened and how you ended up here. Okay?
Sure. So I'm originally from Iraq. I was born in Baghdad. I'm a Chaldean Christian Catholic who was born and raised in Baghdad, Iraq. I survived actually the Iraq-Iran war, and I survived the Gulf War as well. At the age of 1986, I was one of the honor students who scored top 10 in Iraq. So I was asked, as other children at the age of 11, to sing for the previous president Saddam Hussein and the previous Palestinian president Yasser Arafat. He was as well, he was at one of the palaces in Baghdad. So at the time, they grabbed a bunch of kids, to include myself, and I was singing for his birthday, spent the night at one of his castles, and
wow.
I got to meet both of them in 1986. In 1991, both of my brothers were in the military, and one of them served in the southern side of Iraq. He almost got assassinated because he was he was a soldier in the military, in the Iraqi military. So he went AWOL. When he came back, he said, after what I've seen, I'm not going to go back to the military. And we have a law back then, if you abandon your military status, then
Sure.
They want to execute you.
Mm-hmm.
So we were forced to exile Baghdad and Iraq, and we were forced to leave the country. We left everything behind us, and we went to Jordan, lived for about a year until we finished our paperwork for immigration, and then we came to the United States. We arrived here in 1992.
And how old were you approximately?
I was born in 75, so I was about, 14, 15 at the time?
Okay.
So I got here. I didn't have any English background. The only English background is what they taught us back then. It was very limited. No conversation, mainly grammar. I had to be pushed back in education. I had to be pushed back 2 years. So I ended up going to school day and night, high school in the morning, and then ESL classes at night. ESL is English Second Language, to learn English.
Sure.
And then I was able to obtain my high school diploma from San Diego, from El Cajon and Valhalla High School. Finished went to community college. I was able to finish police academy.
Wow.
At the time, this is before the invasion of Iraq in 2003.
Right.
So I finished the police academy, and when I tried to apply, that was during the time that the invasion took place. So there was a lot of hostile environment going on in here. I remember a couple of my professors at the time, they told me when I was on campus, they said, go home, since you're from Iraq, there's a lot of people that are upset because some American soldiers were killed in Iraq, so we don't want you to get hurt. When I graduated, I faced some obstacles. Actually, one of the chief department in one of the department here in San Diego, he said, since you're from Iraq, I'm going to make sure you don't get hired as a police officer. So at the time, I lacked some problems because of the political agendas that was going on between the two countries.
Yeah. So
at
Dunia,
the time,
let me ask you this real quick, because for a lot of our listeners, they don't know that San Diego has a huge Chaldean and Iraqi population. So could you talk about that when you came here? That was where you live, right? With the community. Is that right?
Actually, my dad and my dad's side of family, they've been here since 1950s.
Okay.
When we arrived here, there were not too many Chaldeans or Middle Eastern, period. It was very limited until the invasion of Iraq. That's when everybody started coming in here, migrated here.
Okay.
So at the time, we were like very, very small community. We didn't have a lot of community, like social medias or activities or anything like
Sure.
that. But again, I faced that problem because here's a small student who came in from a country, she was number one in education, and then who struggled to try to learn the language, who didn't have a driver license. I had to walk for hours and hours. I was a parent at the time. I got married at a really young age, at age of 15. I was pregnant with my son. I was a single parent who tried to educate myself and finish my education, but yet I was facing all these obstacles because of the political agendas.
Of course.
So I was not allowed to enter into the police academy because of one of the chief who was very, very, I would say, racist, at the
Yeah,
time because of what
absolutely
happened in
racist.
Iraq. So I ended up finishing my education. I went to San Diego State and I was able to obtain my criminal justice, bachelor in criminal justice. At the time, I was learning another language. I was, learning Spanish as well, and I speak Chaldean Arabic. Then I went, when I finished my bachelor's, that one, they asked in Iraq to go, they wanted some translators. They wanted Iraqi descent translators. So I was asked back in 2003 to go into Iraq. I refused. Not only have I refused at the time, I was totally against the invasion because I had survived the Iraq-Iran war of 8 years of having martyrs, having rockets hit. Actually, one of, 1989 or 1990, one of our bedroom got hit by a rocket, Iranian rocket. So we survived the shelters, we survived the hate, we survived the dead bodies, we survived all these hostile child environment that should have never dealt with.
Sure.
Then I was totally against the invasion of Iraq. So to the point, one of my professors at San Diego State University asked me uh, to do a riot in SDSU, and I ended up doing a riot. Fox News had invited me at the time to do a debate with them, with the mayor. I wrote a letter to the congressman at the time as well, and my name is listed on the news. It says, well, she's one of the she's a student who was against the invasion and the war in Iraq because I didn't want any more people being killed. I didn't want any more innocent people to go through political agendas that we went through when we were kids. But then back in 2005, I was re-asked to go back in Iraq. And at the time, that's when all the corruption agenda took place with the US military, with the rapes inside the prison system. So I wanted to make a difference. So I decided to agree. And then I went with a company. I started off in Iraq as a translator. Then I promoted myself. I didn't have a top.
Slow, slow, slow. This is such a good story. I want to make sure.
Sure.
Yeah. So you decided to finally go back to your country that you had been gone away for many years. So tell the listeners, talk about a little bit about, so slow down a little bit, but tell us kind of, you got this job with this company to go back to Iraq as a translator. How did that feel going back after the invasion?
I left at a young age, and what I remember is the good people. We never had any, coming from a Christian family who had neighbors who were Sunnis or Shias, we never
Sure.
had an issue.
Right.
My best friend was Shia. My other best friend was Sunni. So we lived in an environment, it was a very, very nice environment, besides the wars that we had. Us as a socializing in the area, in the community, it was beautiful. Every evening would bring out a tea, would bring out cakes and cookies, and we will associate. Nobody had ever said, hey, listen, you're Muslim. Hey, listen, you're Christians. There were no such a thing at the time. So going back in there, it felt good. It felt like I've always had a dream that I would go back to my homeland, and
Sure.
I would be so happy to see my homeland. And when I got there, I was very happy, but in the same time, I didn't know anything about any culture. I didn't even know the difference between Sunnis and Shia. I had to learn. I had to educate myself while I was in the military. I would literally sit. My Arabic wasn't even that good, my writing Arabic, because I left at a younger age. So I used to sit and listen to people and try to figure out what they're trying to say. What is this reading? My writings were really weak. So I wanted to do my best to overcome the obstacles that I faced while I was there in the military as a translator. So I asked one of my colleagues if he can help me. He ended up getting me some books about the culture, the tribes, the clans,
Yeah.
all that. So I learned all these educational, and then I asked if I can leave and go find where my house was. I wanted to know. I didn't even know where my house was. I knew the name of the area, but I didn't know exactly what it was.
So when you went back, were you at a U.S. base? Is that
Yes,
right?
I was. Yes, I
Okay,
was. But we would go out on the missions,
right,
and then we would go by like my house, or we would go by the area where I grew up, and I would,
sure,
I would ask colleagues, or I would ask people, locals people, like, where is this place at? Where is this gas station? Because I know our house was next to a gas station, and they will
sure,
point it out to me, and that's when I get really, really emotional. I start crying,
right.
like, this is my childhood. This is where I played soccer, and with my brothers. This is where we grew
Yeah,
up. Why we had to leave. So there were a lot of issues that I faced, living on military base, dealing with the social agenda, was dealing with the history that I faced in the military, dealing with the hostile environment, and the rockets hitting the military base. I survived 4 killings while I was in the military.
so okay, so hold on. Now you were part of the. Did you go with a company, or did you
I
enlist
was I
in
was a
the
DoD
U.S.?
contractor.
Okay,
DoD contractor. I
okay,
started off as a translator. I didn't have. I had a Cat 1, which is a lower level of secret clearance.
okay.
Then they were able to get me a final secret clearance, so I got promoted to run a prison system. And here I got lucky to meet a lot of Saddam's colleagues who were
Former, yeah,
sentenced to be
yeah,
executed
right,
from
right.
the former regime.
So let me,
So I
so let me ask you this real quick. So, were you in the green zone at this time in Baghdad?
it's the green zone. There's a green zone and there is BIAP. BIAP is where the airport. So I would my base was at the BIAP, or the military, where the Air Force is, but I
Sure.
would go to the green zone on a daily basis. There
Okay.
were a lot of military bases. The green zone is one of them.
Now,
So
how is it? Were there other Iraqi translators? How many of
oh yeah, there
you
were not just only Iraqis. There were a lot of like Middle Eastern, Egyptians, Jordanians. It was
spoke? Yeah,
a lot of people went there, and here is the another issue that we faced. A lot of people went in there for the good money, but a lot of people didn't know the Iraqi dialect. So here we came to a lot of problems where they would translate wrong things, and they would get the wrong people arrested. And
sure.
here where I had to learn my dialect, what certain words means, and I was able to save a lot of people. I was able to get about 15 inmates. They were prosecuted and imprisoned illegally, or I won't say illegally, wrongfully,
Sure.
because of the wrong translation. So my main goal was to go there to help our community and to
Absolutely.
help the U.S. Army, of
Yeah.
course, because I want the best for our country and I want the best for U.S. as well. But in the same time, I don't want any hostile
Yeah.
environment. I don't want any more casualties. I don't want anybody to die, whether they were Iraqis or they were Americans.
Did
So
you
I
ever
wanted to
did you
create
ever
peace.
go with the soldiers out on missions, or
Oh
were
yeah,
you
I was there. I was outside the wire every day.
okay?
And that's when I survived 4 killings. They put my name on the assassination list, and they ended up killing one of my friend.
Okay, so for our listeners, who put you on the assassination
At the
list?
time, it was Al Qaeda
Okay,
and Jam, which is Jaish al Mahdi, that
okay.
belongs to Muqtada at the time. I was one of the people that was singled out to be assassinated, and they put me
Because
on
of
the
your role of helping the
because not
Americans.
just of my role, because I'm a Christian as well. They hated any Christians that helped the
Sure,
Americans, thinking that okay, we're trying to defeat Muslims, but
sure.
it wasn't really had nothing to do with the religion thing. It was just we're trying to
Yeah, I
save a
understand.
country.
Right.
So I had to be pulled out of certain areas. Certain areas I was banned. Actually, from the one of the generals had called for me, and he said, there were snipers. There were too many people were trying to kill you, so you're banned from being in this area. We're gonna move you to a different area. And I continued my mission there. I ended up being in charge of a program called TIFRIC program. This is an educational program where I was the director of that program, where we help inmates, Iraqi inmates. We put them through the rehabilitation process, and we integrate them back into the society without
Sure.
having to kill them or anything. So I had 500 employees, local employees that worked for me at the time, as well
So
as Americans.
what now? So you're over in Baghdad. You're there serving. Were you ever how? What was going on with your family back home? You had children. How? Tell us about that separation.
Um, my family were here. I had a problem with my son. I had to leave a young son behind, and he struggled in his life.
I'm
And
sure.
until today, he's still paying some of the prices of my choice that I made. And he feel that I abandoned him, but I didn't. I wanted to go save a country, but in the
I
same time, I
understand.
left my son behind, and he
Sure.
struggled, and he went through a lot of um, emotional breakdown because his mom wasn't around, his dad is not around, and
Sure.
that was another issue that I had to deal with.
Yeah.
So
So here you were trying to help your country, but at the
yes,
same time you were having it ended up affecting your life and your children. I
yes,
understand
of
that.
course.
So how long were you there?
I was there for almost 4.5 years. I started as a translator, then I became the director of that program, the rehabilitation program in
Sure.
Baghdad. Then I was picked to be a special advisor for General Petraeus himself. He was the
Wow.
commander of the U.S. Army, who was based in Baghdad, and his office was right downstairs from my office. So I was his special advisor. I would attend a lot of his meetings, and we were kind of like special advisor slash cultural advisor.
Sure.
And that's when I had to start and learn about all these cultures that I never experienced when I was young. All these clans, from north to south, you got to
Sure.
understand Iraq has a diversity of 7
course.
different religions, and they have each religion has their own culture, their own background, their own traditions. So I had to learn all that, and that's when I started reading a lot while I was in the military over there in the military base. And at the same time, I was able to obtain my. I needed to have some political I would say educational, when it comes to political educational background, because here I am, I sit in high level meetings of a top secret clearance. And that's when I was able to obtain my top secret clearance. I needed to have some background educational on politics between Russia, China. So I was able to obtain my master's at the time from American Military University in political science,
Great.
emphasized in conflict resolution and global security. And that helped me a lot, understand when
Sure.
military
Yeah,
meetings takes place.
yeah, global.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
So
mean, one of the things I wanted to, share with you is that, I grew up in Iran, as you know. I left after the revolution, right before the Iran-Iraq war. So I'm very familiar with, I left. I was lucky to leave, but you were right there in the middle of the war. The one question I have for you is, we had spoken about this before we got on air. Talk about the emotion. How did you feel about, you're there on the American side, but you're originally from Iraq. You left your country. Talk about some of that emotion of dealing with, uh, of just being there. You were against the war, but now you're kind of helping the Americans, but you're also helping people there. How was that emotion of that?
okay, so before I start into answering your question, there is one thing that I want to clarify. A lot of people ask me this: if you were
Sure.
against the war, and you went on riots and you did a
Yes.
lot of political debates, what made you go? I received a letter from the Congress when I cried out for him. I sent him a letter to the White House, and I said, please stop this war. I don't want any people to die. I don't want any people to get hurt. When he sent me the letter back, and when the troops took over and they invaded Iraq, and proudly I would say they invaded Iraq, because in my mentality back then, they were there to help the country. But then they even admitted it was invasion. My main goal was to help our people and to help,
Sure.
I didn't want nobody from the US soldiers to get hurt. At the same time, I didn't want nobody from our people to get hurt. So in Iraq, there is a term that says the destroyment already took place. So the military were already there. So there was no reason for me not to go and help. I couldn't save them by letting them go, not letting them enter, but in the same time, I can play another role by going in there and try to help. So that's when I decided to go back in 2005.
Makes sense.
I didn't go in 2003. I went in 2005. And that was 2 years
Makes
after
sense.
the soldiers were in the US military were already there. So I couldn't do
Yeah.
nothing about it.
So now
When I
you're there to
went
help.
there,
Yeah, I get it.
yes. So I went there to help. So when I went there, I was very hurt. I was very hurt to see a lot of orphanages, a lot of destroyed buildings, a lot of Iraq is a very beautiful country. And it's sad that I got to see a lot of American soldiers in the beginning. They were helping each other. And they were really nice to the Iraqi people. Iraqi people were very nice as well to them. And in the end, it became hostile just because some political agendas that popped up, and they start to have the hatreds among both of them. And that's when all the killings and the explosions took place. And that's when I really got emotionally destroyed, because our goal is to have every country to live at peace. Our goal is not to have any country go in history and destroy their history and destroy their future and live a poor life. And when I got to see a lot of females being on the street picking up trash so they can eat off the trash can, or children that lost their parents, that used to hurt me to the
Of course.
point I I was so limited I couldn't help. The only thing I could do is I used to adapt some of these kids while I was serving in the military. So any salary I would pick up, I would take some money with me and I will start giving money out while I'm
Sure.
serving, while
Yeah.
I'm on a mission with the military. A couple kids, like, they would want houses, to rent. I would try to use my outside resources and help them out. A couple translators needed help. They almost assassinate them when they found it, because you got to understand, even the locals faced a lot of problems.
Of
The
course.
locals,
Yeah.
they got disrespected by some of the soldiers. They got really, really, Iraqis community. If they found out there was this Iraqi person is helping the U.S. Army, they would assassinate him and assassinate his
Absolutely.
family.
Yeah.
So I was able to save about 5 individuals and had them leave the country, and currently they're in the United States.
That's great.
I was also able to save a lot of. I was able to fire about 4 United States soldiers because they mistreated
Bad
locals
behavior. Yeah. Mhm.
who were employed with us. They used to disrespect them, and a couple of them used to even beat or physically hit Iraqi locals, and
Sure.
even if they were inmates or so I was there just to create justice.
Harmony. Yeah. Harmony. Yeah.
And that's what I did. I mean, I filed reports against about 4 soldiers, and 4 soldiers were terminated from the U.S. Army, and they were sent back because of their misbehaviors. And I've told them, even if you grab an inmate, if you can't do something in your country, you're not allowed to do it at other countries, because you have to follow the justice system. And that's what I was there. And believe it or not, at the beginning I was against it, but when I went there, I felt like God had sent me there to
Absolutely.
create that justice.
Absolutely.
And that's what I did.
So that's great. It's an amazing story, and I think you've helped so many people, probably in ways that you don't even think about. So what happened at the end of that? When you came back? What happened when you came back to the United States?
Because I helped so many locals gain their locals. Now you got to understand, there's locals that work for the U.S. Army, and
Sure.
We call them locals.
Right.
They're contracted at a local level. Because I helped so many of them, and because I took care of some of my employees who were local, I had 500 employees. The U.S. Army started looking at me differently. They started, I wouldn't say attack me, but they started like digging into, like, why are you talking to this local? Why you want the right for this local? And then I would do the same thing with the Iraqis. They would say, why are you helping this American soldier? So I got stuck as a ball between the two. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm here to create justice. I'm here to help everybody. If you cannot understand this, then that's your problem.
My time is done.
What happened in the end? I was involved with an Iraqi local, and I got married to him.
Okay.
And because of that, I violated United States laws. So I was not only terminated, I was the top secret clearance was suspended from me. I didn't have any more top
Got it.
secret clearance
Okay.
because of that. And I didn't care, honestly,
So-
because I had enough 4 or 5
Yeah.
years of living under a certain hostile environment. You can't even breathe, you can't even go outside, you can't travel, you can't do anything. If you use the bathroom, you have to tell them you're using the bathroom.
Yeah.
So it was
It's-
too much.
Emotionally, it's too much. Yeah.
That's when I decided to take my other master's and professor.
Mhm.
And then I was able to obtain my PhD, my doctorate degree in management and leadership in higher education.
Okay.
So I came back to the United States in 2009. I was able to go back to Iraq on another side and start working for educational purposes. So I opened about 4 schools. That are
That's
American
amazing.
schools, but the company runs out of Lebanon.
Got it.
I was the director of some of these schools. I was able to implement some educational backgrounds, train teachers, and then from there, that's when my Iraqi journey took place. That's when I said, you know what, listen, I went to Dubai, I went to Qatar at the time. So I was hopping around between Middle Eastern countries. That's when I learned a lot of more cultures. I visited about 67 countries, and I was able to learn a lot of their culture, traditions, education. I gained a lot of knowledge during that time. And that's when I said, you know what, Iraq needs me. And this is the time that I need to go back and show my skills as a human being, not as a soldier.
Sure.
And that's when I was able to obtain my attorney license. And I came back here. I keep going back and forth because my family are here. And back in 21, I believe, I ran for the city council. So I ran
Yeah, that's
for an
awesome.
office in the city of El Cajon. And I did it for two reasons. And here's the thing. I didn't do it because I wanted to win. I did it for a reason. I wanted to show the corrupted Iraqi government that when you run for an office, you have to care for your people. You have to care for your
Sure.
community. You just don't ignore them the whole 3 years, 3.5 years. And then during the final phase of when election's going to come through, that's when you start go building houses and take care of the poor people. And you just want to show off. So I didn't run a campaign here. I didn't pay for the campaign. I knocked on doors here in El Cajon to show people how the Chaldean people, like me, were good people. Not everybody's bad, just like the way I felt back in 2004. And actually, it's funny because I ran into a story here. I had print out on flyers. I used to pass out flyers that had my goals, and some of these goals is to get rid of the EDD scam, reform educational systems, making sure that our people don't create any corruptions, educational or welfare corruptions. So I knocked on the door in one of these ladies because they needed some signatures for me to run for the city council. So I had to go knock doors to introduce people, who I am, what my goals. And this white lady opened the door and she said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm here. I'm running for the city council and I need to obtain some signatures. And I wanted to introduce myself to you." And this is her first word to me. "You're Chaldean, huh? You're Iraqi, huh?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I'm not voting for you. You guys came in here and you invaded El Cajon. You think you own the city. You guys corrupted. You did this, you did that." So she started going off about some individuals who were really corrupted in here. So I looked at her, I let her finish talking, and I said, "Ma'am, can I talk now?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Let me show you what my goals are. Back in 2004, I wanted to be a first police officer in here, and I was the first Chaldean Iraqi police officer, and they denied my rights because United States entered and invaded Iraq. And that affected me personally. I was pulled out of campus, school campus, and I was approached by two professors telling me to go home. There's a lot of hostile
Safety.
environment. You're gonna
Yeah.
get hit. You're gonna get hurt. So go home. I said I had to deal with that. I never said all of you Americans are bad. Yes, there are some bad Iraqis. Yes, there are some bad Middle Eastern, but that doesn't include all of us. And let me show you what my goals are. When she heard what I said, she just got quiet and she said, "You know what? I will vote for you."
That's awesome.
She changed her mentality.
What a
And I
great
was
story.
happy I was able to get
Yeah, one
some of
person.
these mentalities out. And I didn't care if I won the city council or not. It just, I wanted to prove to people they need to look at the other side of the picture. And
That's a great story.
I accomplished this not only here in Iraq as well. I showed some of politicians, "Hey, listen, this is what you need to do. You need to go out there and help your community and help your citizens achieve their educational, their health, their everything that they need, their basic services. You're not here just to grab money and put it in your pocket." And by the way, I
Absolutely.
have to say this. I was approached by many political figures in Iraq, and I was offered to be a parliament member. I was offered to be a
Sure.
minister, and I
I
never
can see
took it.
that. Yeah,
And I
smart.
never took it. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is because I didn't want to lie to my people. I didn't want to lie to my citizens over there and say, "You know what? I will make a difference for you, but I cannot make a difference other than adding money into my pocket."
That's great.
That's why I refused that.
Yeah. Well, this is a great story. So I want to bring it to an end, but your story is incredible, and how many people you've helped, and your commitment to being ethical is phenomenal, and it's going to be such a great message. So the last thing I want to ask you is, what is your message? First of all, it's amazing. I'm originally from Iran. You're from Iraq. I have a lot of Iraqi friends. Iran and Iraq were in a war for 8 years, but today on my podcast, an Iranian immigrant is interviewing an Iraqi immigrant. So that's the beauty of America. But what is your message for everyone? What would you like to leave all of our listeners?
It's funny you said that because earlier this morning I posted something on social media saying that everybody knows that I hate the Iranian government.
Right.
And
So
I'm
do
very,
I.
very anal about the Iranian government. And the reason
Sure.
for is because they suspended my childhood.
Yeah,
They
of course.
suspended the rest of our childhoods. And we lived, and not just Iranian, the Iraqi government at the time, the previous regime.
Sure.
And I posted something on social media saying, I don't have nothing against the Iranian people that lives in United States. And the reason for that is because United States not only had changed everybody's mentality, about how we see things. I was taught to look at the half a glass. It's not half empty, it's half full of oxygen. So you got to have a different vision of these individuals. Don't look at people's background just because of their religion. Don't look at people's background just because they came from a certain country. Not all Iraqis wear scarves and criminals or terrorists. Not all Iranians are very strict when it comes to
Khomeini, right,
religion, or they're from Khomeini's,
Yeah.
Look at the individual himself. If there's a lot of people that worked so hard to overcome the negativity of what the culture had brought us, and we did that, we got rid of all that. I pick up the best part of every culture, and that's how I live it.
That's awesome.
And that's my message, is don't look at people because of their background. Look at how they overcome this and how they become today, how successful they are, and how they work so hard in trying to live a peaceful life. And that's what we need. People who are fighting politically, they're always going to fight, and it's all economical agendas.
Yeah.
And this, whether if it's with Palestinians, with Israelis, with Iran, with Iraq, with any countries, with the United States, with Russia, with China, it's all has to do with economic background agenda. And saying this from having a master's in political science and lived it, I know what it's about. And I'd love to have people see it that way. Yeah. Don't look at the innocent people, because innocent people have nothing to do with this.
Yeah. And you know what? This is really, message. That's a great message. This is the essence of the Voice of a Stranger. This is the reason why I started this podcast, to bring communities together, to give people voices. And you are an incredible example of success. What an incredible story of coming here during a time, especially with the history. Both Iran and Iraq have such an interesting, sometimes sad history with the United States of America. And just like you, I've tried through example when people meet me to learn about the Iranian and Persian culture. So I really want to thank you. This has been an incredible interview, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be leaving some amazing comments. So thanks again.
And I want to say, I want to add something before you go, Mr. Reza. Something is very important that I didn't mention.
Go ahead.
3 years ago, a lot of people, because they view me differently, a lot of people view me in Iraq as she's a friend of America. And then when I come here, she's a friend of Iraq. I was put on the hit list, and the FBI had approached me and told me not to go back to Iraq. That was back in 2000, like 3 years ago. People tried to assassinate me while I was in Iraq. I was 10 minutes away from being killed. What brought me back, what made me determined to go back to Iraq, is the good people that I helped. They went and they start talking to these militias and members, and they said, wait a second, what are you doing? This lady has nothing to do with this. She's done nothing but helped us out. And that was able to save my life. And now I'm going back and forth with no problems.
Well, we wish you great health and great success with all the different languages you speak, the degrees.
Thank
you really are the perfect example of what an immigrant can do in America and how they can help so many people. So thank you so much. I'm really honored to have you here as our guest.
Thank you so much, Reza. Have a good day. And thank you for having me again with you.
Great. Okay.
Thanks for joining us this week. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or on your webpage at thevoicesofastranger.com. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend and subscribe to the show. Tune in next week for a new guest. Until next time, keep living life with passion and make each day count.